A Light in the Silence, the story of Mrs. Eliza and Ben. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Mrs. Eliza's small, modest home. She stirred in her chair by the window, the quiet ticking of the clock filling the empty room. Today was her birthday, though it hardly felt like one anymore. In her youth, this day had been marked by the sound of children laughing, the warm embraces of loved ones, and the sweet aroma of a freshly baked cake. But now, those memories felt as distant as stars, their light dimmed by the passing years. Eliza had lived in this house for decades. It was here she had raised her 3 children alongside her husband, Henry, a kind and gentle man who had passed away over a decade ago. Together, they had filled these walls with love, creating a sanctuary where their children had flourished. But as the years went by, their children grew up, moved to different cities, and slowly drifted away. Calls became infrequent, visits even rarer, and the once lively house had grown still. On this particular morning, Eliza felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest. Birthdays, once her favorite time of year, had become a reminder of what was lost. Her children had long since stopped remembering the date. She couldn't recall the last time she'd received a phone call or card from them, and though she tried to be understanding, life was busy. After all, there was no denying the sting of neglect. Determined to make the day bearable, Eliza had spent the previous evening preparing a small cake. The recipe was one she had used countless times before, back when her children would eagerly gather around the kitchen table, their eyes wide with anticipation. This time, there would be no eager faces, no laughter, just the quiet hum of her thoughts. She had frosted the cake carefully, decorating it with the simplest of designs, a delicate swirl of icing and 2 candles. As the day wore on, Eliza busied herself with small chores. She watered her potted plants, tidied the already spotless living room, and sorted through old photographs, each one a bittersweet reminder of happier times. She tried to ignore the growing lump in her throat, but by mid-afternoon, the silence became unbearable. Sitting alone at the table, the little cake before her, she poured herself a cup of tea and let her tears fall freely. Her solitude was suddenly interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Startled, Eliza wiped her eyes, her heart racing. Could it be? The fleeting hope that one of her children had remembered her birthday filled her chest. Quickly, she stood and made her way to the door, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. But when she opened it, it wasn't one of her children. Instead, a young man stood on her porch, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His face was kind, his smile warm yet uncertain. He wore simple, neat clothing, and though Eliza didn't recognize him, there was something familiar about his gentle demeanor. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eliza," he said softly. "My name is Ben. I walk past your house every day on my way to work, and I've noticed you sitting by the window. Today, you seemed a little sad, so I thought I'd stop by and bring you these." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the grayness she had felt all day. "Oh, Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's very kind of you." "Thank you." She invited him in, her loneliness momentarily forgotten. The two sat together at her small kitchen table, the little cake still sitting untouched between them. Ben noticed the candles and tilted his head curiously. "It's my birthday," Eliza admitted, a touch of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I made this for myself, but I wasn't expecting anyone to share it with." "Well, happy birthday, Mrs. Eliza," Ben said warmly. "Why don't we light those candles and celebrate?" Eliza hesitated for a moment before nodding. Her hands trembled as she lit the candles, and together they sang Happy Birthday. Ben's voice was bright and cheerful, filling the room with a warmth Eliza hadn't felt in years. Her own voice was soft and choked with emotion, but as they finished the song, she couldn't help but smile. For the next few hours, they shared the small cake, and Eliza found herself opening up to Ben in a way she hadn't with anyone in years. She told him stories of her youth, of her husband, and of her children when they were little. Ben listened attentively, his eyes full of kindness and interest. He laughed at her anecdotes, asked thoughtful questions, and shared a few stories of his own. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow across the room, Ben stood to leave. "Thank you for letting me celebrate with you, Mrs. Eliza," he said. "I'll be back soon. I'd love to hear more of your stories." Eliza's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him goodbye. "Thank you, Ben," she whispered. "You've made this the happiest birthday I've had in years." True to his word, Ben began visiting regularly. Every Saturday, he would arrive with a small gift. A book he thought she might enjoy, fresh flowers, or a treat from a local bakery. Sometimes, he came empty-handed, bringing only his bright smile and willingness to listen. Eliza's once silent house was soon filled with laughter and conversation, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen and cared for. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between Eliza and Ben deepened. One evening, as they sat together, Eliza looked at him with a mix of gratitude and affection. "Ben," she said softly, "I've been thinking. I never had grandchildren, and my own children, well, they have their own lives. But you've become like family to me." Ben smiled, his eyes warm. "You're like family to me too, Mrs. Eliza. I lost my grandmother years ago, and meeting you has felt like finding her again." Moved by their mutual affection, they decided to make it official. With the help of a lawyer, Eliza adopted Ben as her grandson. The legalities were simple, but the emotional significance was profound. Eliza's heart swelled with joy, and Ben was equally elated to call her his grandmother. Over time, Ben's presence transformed Eliza's home. He brought his friends over occasionally, filling the house with youthful energy and laughter. They played board games, shared meals, and listened to Eliza's stories, their presence rekindling a vitality she hadn't felt in years. But as the seasons changed, so did Eliza's health. She grew weaker, and the once lively house grew quiet again. Ben, ever loyal, stayed by her side, caring for her with unwavering devotion. He read to her, held her hand, and reminded her every day how much she was loved. On a peaceful morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, Eliza passed away with Ben holding her hand. His heart broke as he said goodbye to the woman who had become his family. He stayed with her until the end, honoring the bond they had shared. When her children were notified of her passing, they showed little more than a perfunctory interest. They gathered for the reading of her will, expecting to inherit her modest belongings. But as the lawyer read her final words, they were shocked. "To my children, the will read, I wish you well. Though our paths drifted apart, I hope you find happiness. But to Ben, who gave me love and joy when I had nothing left, I leave my home. This house has been filled with memories of kindness and laughter because of you, and I hope you fill it with your own happiness." Ben's eyes filled with tears as he listened. Eliza's children protested, calling him a stranger, but Ben knew better. He wasn't a stranger to her. He was family. With the house now his, Ben vowed to honor Eliza's memory. He filled it with kindness, warmth, and love, just as she had done. And though she was no longer there, her spirit lived on in every corner, every cherished memory, and every act of kindness he carried forward.